Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about all things vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you so much for listening. Today's show is so much fun. I get to speak with Cynthia Stringham, who is actually Melon Monologues on Instagram. Now, if you haven't followed her, definitely go check her out on Instagram at Melon Monologues. She is such a riot. She's so educational. Everything from, bugs to pollinators to vegetables, flowers, all things that we love to talk about here on Gardening Utah. And I can't wait for you to hear more about what she has to say. We really had a riot on this show. So while you're here, I wanted to tell you, subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts if you're not already. All you need to do is look up the podcast button on your phone if you are on iPhone and go to Apple Podcasts and search Gardening Utah, hit that subscribe button, and then you'll get notified every single time we launch a new episode. And we also air on the weekends here on KKAT 860 AM on Saturday and Sunday at 10 a.m. My hope is this is a fun and informative show that you can listen to while you're kind of getting in the garden mood, you're out working in the garden, or when you're out and about shopping at the nurseries and garden centers. Plug in some earphones and have a listen to Gardening Utah while you're strolling around. And as always, let us know what you would like to see on Gardening Utah. Message us on Instagram. We are at Gardening Utah, and we can have one of our experts answer your question on an upcoming show. Okay, so here's a quick money-saving tip. If you are working on putting a new landscape together, whether it's your front yard, your backyard, or if you're just wanting to spruce up the yard that you currently have and make it more water-wise or a lot more fun with some entertainment places, if you didn't listen to episode 10 of this podcast, I highly suggest it. It was on LOCALSCAPES with Cynthia B., and she is a LOCALSCAPES designer. Well, if you didn't catch this on last week's show, I just wanted to remind you that LOCALSCAPES has given Gardening Utah listeners 3 free online classes on how to design your perfect yard. And all you need to do is go to localscapes.com and you will be able to use the code Gardening Utah, one word, and that will give you 3 free classes that you can choose from. And it is a $30 value. So make sure that you go to localscapes.com if you're, like I said, whether you're just sprucing up your yard or you really want to, get your new one put in, either way, LOCALSCAPING will help you. So Gardening Utah, that's the code for $30 off. All right. So I'm so excited for this show with Cynthia Stringham from Melon Monologues on Instagram. But first, the tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is, now is the time to go out and spray the field bindweed. Now, what am I talking about? What's field bindweed? Well, you may call it morning glory, you may call it creeping Jenny, or you might call it the actual devil's growing plant itself. However, field bindweed is a problem. In grass, it's a problem in gardens, and it might even just be coming over through the fence from your neighbor's garden. Either way, now is the best time to start spraying it. Now, there are many different ways that you can try to prevent field bindweed, and like I said, try. Prevent is key because it is very difficult to control and can take many years to get rid of. And so it is very important that as soon as you see it propping up, that you do something about it. Now, what you do about it is going to completely depend on if it's in your lawn or if it's in your flower garden, or like I said, if it's growing on the fence coming in from the neighbor's yard. But basically, right now is the perfect time to spray it if you decide to use a chemical method of prevention and trying to get down and kill those roots, because right now you'll notice that little white flower is out there, and when it flowers is the best time to spray because a lot of energy is going into making that flower so it can produce seed. You do not want this plant to go to seed because those seeds will outlast all of us in the soil, and they find their way to crop up in many, many ways. So one of my tips, the chemical that you can use to put, if you choose to take that method, is 2,4-D or glyphosate, which is commonly known as Roundup. One of my tips, because you don't want this getting into your flower garden or anywhere else that you have a plant that you need to protect. So I like to take some kind of a gallon jug or a soda bottle, like a 1-liter soda bottle, and I cut off the bottom, leaving the top opening. So just cut off the bottom. Then I like to go to where the field bindweed is and play its own game on itself. Roll it up into itself. Pull all the leaves off of all the plants or the trees or wherever it's vining itself around, and roll it up into the most condensed ball that you can. And then I like to stick that inside whatever plastic container I'm going to use. And then I take my spray bottle and I spray down through the hole in the liter jar or the gallon jug onto the plant. And that way you know that you are controlling that chemical to only that weed. So that is one of my tips to really help control field bindweed. And again, right now the plant is flowering. So as you see those white flowers, now is the time, because the plant's putting energy into the flower and not as much energy in the roots. And those plants have roots. So chemicals is one way that you can, if you choose, to control field bindweed. Now, if it is out in the grassy area or somewhere that you maybe haven't planted anything yet, then black plastic put down right on top of it for a long time, mind you, can help control it. But many ways that you have to attack this plant, because chemicals won't work alone, because again, it's creating underground storage in those rhizomes. So you've got to dig, you've got to pull, and you've got to, attack it from all angles. But again, my tip of the week is now is the time to spray if you choose to do so, and really protect those other plants by utilizing plastic containers to keep your other flowers safe. And that was the tip of the week.
Never miss a tip for your garden, and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Okay, Utah, let's make a pact. Let's all agree to work together on the elimination of field bindweed. I know we can do this, but it is true. It is a monster weed, and you have to actively attack it from all possible sides in order to control it. So if we all work together on this, we'll all have a more lovely yard. Okay, so after the break, we are going to be talking with Cynthia Stringham from Melon Monologues. That is her Instagram sort of alter ego. I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. We have an absolute riot. We talk about fruits and vegetables, the best ones to plant, the best ones to grow, which ones are the most delicious coming straight out of the garden. And we also talk about the benefits of backyard bees and how unscary it actually is. We have a great conversation. So join us right after the break here on Gardening Utah.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in our virtual studio today, I am so excited to have Cynthia Stringham, aka Melon Monologues on Instagram, with me today. Cynthia, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Jana. It's awesome.
I have tell you what, so when I first started the podcast and I started asking around to people like, hey, I'm interviewing experts around the state of Utah and people who, are really good at gardening, because I'm not a master gardener, I'm not a horticulturist, but I am a absolute, passionate about gardening and have been gardening for, my whole adult life. So as I asked around to people, who do you think, who would be fun to have on the show? So many people kept saying, oh, Melon Monologues.
Oh,
and I'm like,
so nice.
I know.
I'm not a horticultural eater, so I'm an over-enthusiastic gardener as well. So that's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, so I was like, okay, wait, I have to be in the know on this Melon monologue. So I look it up on Instagram, and obviously have had so much fun watching your stories and everything. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to creating what is Melon Monologues on Instagram?
Sure. So I have always been into gardening. My dad was kind of the food gardener. My mom was more the flowers, and I've always just loved it. I've always had a garden, I can't even remember all the times I've always had a garden. But last year, I was just searching fun people to follow or fun friends, or trying to build a community for myself of overly active gardeners. And I found social media was the best option. But I did not tell anybody that I was starting Melon Monologues because I was kind of embarrassed about it. So the only person that knew was my husband. And then this great group did some big promotion and pushed it out, and I kind of felt dumb. So I showed it to people that I knew. And it was great because now I'm not embarrassed. Well, sometimes I'm embarrassed because there's lots of crazy things that are on my account. But I have found so many fantastic gardeners that are in Utah and that are, frankly, in all parts of the country. And it's so great to connect with people and have this synergy of let's grow food, let's grow everything, and let's get rid of lawns. I love lawns, but let's cut them back a little bit.
Yes. I love that. And I was so inspired by looking at your Instagram. There's just so many, it's like you embody so much of what I love to do, between beekeeping and composting and, growing food and the most beautiful annuals and perennials.
Yes. It's fun to get a good mix. And I think that's the big thing is I think if we really look at gardens and we look at beautiful gardens, it's all about diversity and just mixing it all in there. And, I think the more you can, for me personally, the more you can add in, the merrier. I love those beautiful Zen gardens, but I am personally not that wouldn't be making me happy. So whatever I can squeeze into a garden, I try my best to get it all in there. Be it veggies, be it perennials, be it annuals. I want to see it all because I want to see everybody in the party. I like to invite everybody to my party.
Yes.
My garden party.
Right? And garden parties are the best parties. And you know what? And gardening people are the best people. I anytime you talk to someone with a love of gardening, it's just really, there's just something special going on,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a great way to connect with nature and just see how everything really works together, and that honestly, we have very little to do with anything beyond planting the seeds. We have to care and nurture for them, but they all want to grow, and you just give them a little bit of love and they will produce and love you back.
Absolutely. Isn't that the truth? And so when I was looking at your Instagram, one thing that I've always loved to do is, and I don't think I've ever talked about it here on Gardening Utah, so I think this is going to be such a fun tip and takeaway for our listeners, which is I noticed that you had planted beets and lettuce in your garden beds, and it was in a way that it was so accentuated. It accentuated the vegetable and it accentuated the flowers, and it was in such a beautiful. And you know what? I'll repost what it is I'm talking about so that you guys can see this too. And you can go to Melon Monologues on Instagram to check out what we're talking about. But I think that's such a cool takeaway. Tell us some of your strategies there, because I'm with you. I love to incorporate vegetables with flowers.
For sure. I think it takes a little bit of practice. I'm not going to lie. It takes some succession planning. I know some people, which I get so nice to plant it one and done, right? Just put the seeds in that are going to, or the annuals that are going to bring you color all summer long. But I will, for example, I've learned my timing. So I get any of my lettuces or any of the crops that I can grow in the spring, and I will plant them, but I will kind of keep them spaced a little bit. So then by April, I can put my petunias in, or I can put my annual vinca. I can put my colors in between the lettuces. And then as I harvest the lettuce, those other flowers will fill in. So it's great because I can squeeze in such a small amount of space, not only some beautiful flowers, but I can get lettuce, radishes. I mean, this is what I'm harvesting right now out of my flower bed is lettuce, radishes, beets, green onions. I have Napa cabbage coming out the ears. I have artichokes that I'm pulling up. And this is all just in my front flower beds. What else do I have?
Oh,
There was
wow.
something else that I was just like, I'm like, oh, obviously some spinach and some sorrel. Like I have all these great things and carrots all coming out right this second in just a small space. But beyond that, you don't notice the holes in the garden because of how I've intermixed them with the flowers. So one head of lettuce gone doesn't mean much. Like it's not like, oh, look at this giant gaping hole. Even with the cabbage, I will plant like sweet alyssum. I love planting around my cabbage. One, because it protects the cabbage. It gets all those wonderful parasitic wasps that will come in and kill aphids.
Really?
To come in. Yes. And so I'll plant sweet alyssum around it. But then once I pull out my cabbage, because it's done for its time, the sweet alyssum fills in the gaps. It takes maybe about a week to 2 weeks, but then the holes are gone. So it's just this constant great way of getting more food, more bang for your buck for your garden, right? It's not all just about flowers or separating your vegetables from your flowers in a small space like my front bed. Granted, it's a long bed, but it's only about 5 feet wide. And I think probably it's a longer bed, about 40, 60 feet long, but it's like a front border bed that a lot of people only plant perennials on, which is great. But you can totally squeeze in a chunk of green onions, which I use green onions all the time, or radishes or anything, right? Like there's so much that you can also squeeze in around those perennials that will give you some great food while you're enjoying all those flowers at the same time.
Gosh, isn't that the truth? This is so inspiring to me. I love it. I've got a whole bunch of, I've had a lot of fun this year with cilantro. Last year I planted like 4 or 5 plants. And of course, if you let it turn into coriander, you're going to have it everywhere. And this year I've just like let it grow because, it's so fun to it feels like, do you feel the same way as me? I mean, I know I'm such a garden geek, but I get such a rush out of like, oh no, this recipe calls for cilantro. Oh, oh, guess what? I've got it all in my garden right now. And just walking outside, there's just something about like harvesting the fresh cilantro or like you said, the green onions. I've got so many of them growing here and there. It's such a rush to just go out and, pick something and bring it in and cook it.
Oh, it's awesome. My poor kids, I say it all the time. There's so many things when they're older as adults that they're going to have to go through therapy for because of my mothering skills, which one is we sit down at the table. I'm like, before they eat, I'm like, this came from our garden. This came from our garden. This came from our garden. And you're going to eat it all. You're going to eat it. And they're just like, I don't want to eat any more of this. But it's so funny because I'm like, first off, that took a long time to grow. And so you're going to enjoy it. You're going to love it. But second off, I want you to know that your mom grew this. Anyways, no, it's a total rush. I mean, sometimes it can be overwhelming too. Frankly, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this Napa? And I'm going to do with all the artichokes. But you get super creative in all the things that you can cook. And there is nothing better than having food that comes straight from the garden and eating it and knowing you've got all those great nutrients. It hasn't been sitting on a truck for I don't know how long. Hasn't been sitting in the store for how long. And it's funny, it's because some things people tell me that they hate, like chard or kale or even just radishes. And I'm like, one, you're not cooking it right. Or beets. I always get that too. I'm like, you're not cooking it right.
That's right.
And two, probably because you're getting it like 2 weeks old, and nobody likes anything 2 weeks old. So if you have it fresh, it's a totally different ballgame.
Isn't that
same with strawberries? Oh my gosh, my strawberries right now, I kid you not. It is like dessert. I keep slapping my kids' hands like, no, those ones are mom's. I have their section of strawberries that are like older strawberry plants. They're not producing as well. And I have this new section of strawberry plants, and it is like hands off. These are mom's special strawberries. This is mom's special strawberries. Back off, boys.
There's truly nothing like picking a fresh strawberry. I mean, honestly, I mean, as you think of produce, you're right. I mean, everything when it's, not only is it a rush that, hey, I did this myself, especially right now with what's going on in the world, but it just tastes exponentially different. And I think that, well, this is an interesting question for you. When I think to what is the vegetable or fruit that tastes so dramatically different from store-bought to home? And I would have to say, just off the top of my head, I haven't thought about this extensively. I'm just thinking of it now, but I would say for vegetables, it would have to be tomatoes, and for fruit, it would probably have to be strawberries. What do you think?
I'm with you. Actually, I'd probably say blackberries, because a fresh blackberry versus the ones that have like lost all the juice into the fabric at the store. You know how they have that like bottom cotton layer? That is so sad to me. Those are not blackberries, but you have a fresh blackberry, and that thing, it's funny to me. Two things. My neighbor actually came over last night. She's talking to me, and I got a special spot with my strawberries, and I gave her one, and she bit into it, and she's like, "What is it that's so different?" And I'm like, "It's fresh." And she's like, "I know all the ones at the store are white in the center, and this one's red." I'm like, "Yes, because you're picking it right. You're not picking it before it's not ready." Same thing with blackberries.
Oh, wow. I love that. It's so true. There's just nothing like it. Well, listen, when we come back after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and we're also going to talk about bees in the backyard and the pros and cons here with Cynthia Stringham, Melon Monologues, right here on KKAT. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jenna Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jenna Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jenna Francis, and with me in our virtual studio today is Cynthia Stringham from Melon Monologues on Instagram.
Hello!
And we have been having a blast talking about, before the break, we were talking about the fruits and vegetables that are so exponentially different when you grow them in the backyard and pick them fresh versus when they've been, grown in mass production and shipped to your stores. Tell me a little bit, let's talk a little bit more about vegetables that you think have a dramatic difference. I mean, one of the reasons why I do grow tomatoes is, one, because they taste so dramatically different, but also they're a really economical, use of space in my mind, because they are pretty pricey in stores. So what are your other favorite vegetables to grow and why?
I honestly love growing almost everything. I think my newest favorite is honestly growing artichokes right now. One, probably because my plants from last year, because artichokes are generally a perennial. If grown in the right location, and then they are larger the next year. So this year I have the most beautiful artichokes that are ready to harvest. And last year I didn't get artichokes until July, and they're really good. They were smaller. These are like the ones that you see at the store that are like, you think there's something wrong with them, that they're on steroids. And it's so exciting to see that mine are on steroids out my front yard. So artichokes I am loving. I feel like fruits, and I consider tomato fruit.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they're always a win. If there is something though, so I have this gal that I work with, and she is fantastic. She loves really fancy food, and she's gone to all these beautiful fancy restaurants. And one was she's gone to all the Michelin stars. She said she went to 3 Michelin star restaurants last year alone, and she has never had a fresh melon before. And she's like, "I'm not a melon person." I'm like, "You have to try this. You have to try this." And she ate the melon, and she said, "I have eaten at these wonderful, amazing restaurants." She's like, "My favorite thing I ate last year was the cantaloupe." And I'm like, "That's right. That cantaloupe is worth $60, because when you pick it ripe and you pick it right and good, it is the most delicious thing, Jenna. A fresh That's how I sold my husband on the garden in general, is to have a fresh cantaloupe. So there's 2 things I have to have for him: fresh cantaloupe and fresh corn, because there is nothing like having like a corn that is immediately picked and have those sugars right up there ready for you to eat. So yes, there's so much. Jan, I could go on for days, girl.
Oh.
I like have so many things that it's all just better.
Oh, I know.
I guess the only thing that doesn't make a difference is probably potatoes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Taste the same, except the problem is that the expensive potatoes that I like really dark blue majestic potatoes,
Yes.
those are just too expensive in the store. But like russet potatoes, a potato is a potato or a potato. It just tastes the same. But the nice like rose colored ones and those ones are worth growing because you'll save some money in your bank.
Yeah, I've grown quite a few this year, just kind of rare potatoes, like you mentioned, like the purples and just the rare varieties that you either can't find in the store or they are more expensive. There is a little bit of I agree with you on russets too. They don't taste that much different. The other thing that doesn't taste too much different to me are peppers. You know, like cayenne peppers or jalapenos. And I grow. Oh, yeah. I'm growing right now probably 30 completely different varieties of peppers, just because I love to make hot sauce. I love to make salsas, and I love to dry the peppers and make cayenne pepper of all just different flavors and blends with sometimes, jalapeno or maybe a sweet pepper. I do all kinds of crazy stuff and make the seasonings and the crushed red pepper flakes and stuff. It tastes so different that way when you dry them and make hot pepper flakes. I noticed you did that too.
I did, yes. That's something I actually do. I love, like you said, like making your own seasonings are totally different. Those are really good. Like, and I love drying hot peppers. I actually think the joy I get out of growing peppers, because I grow a lot of peppers, is I think I struggled with them for so long because I didn't realize all the needs that come with peppers, because they really like it hot, but they need to be shaded or the fruit's going to scald. And they want to have more covering. So those are definitely plants that I put my peppers with lots of flowers to help shade the plant but keep it hot. But my joy I get out of growing peppers is now my peppers are the size of the ones that you get at the store. And so it's just like exciting to me saying, yeah, I can grow those peppers too.
Totally.
But yeah, I think, and it's fun. I don't know. The peppers, I have to agree with you. I don't know if there's too much of a difference, but they're still a vital part of my garden.
Same. And like I said, fresh, I don't notice a huge difference, but when I dry them and dehydrate and then make the flavored seasonings, I mean, a crushed red pepper, just that you buy in the store, is crushed red pepper. I love it. I put on it everything. But when you dehydrate your own peppers and make it yourself, it's this rich roasted flavor that just, you cannot beat it. In fact, last night it was so funny. I was just kind of doing some pantry clean out and found a couple different bags of peppers and realized, I'm kind of getting low on my crushed red pepper. And my one of my sons, my older sons, he doesn't have a sense of smell. He broke his nose at an early age and has no sense of smell at all. But I'm sitting there sneezing like crazy because I had him in a plastic bag and I'm banging on the bag, to just kind of make the crushed red pepper. And then I put some in a little Ninja blender so that I could make cayenne. So I'm just kind of sitting there doing my thing and I'm sneezing up a storm because, it's getting in the air.
Yeah.
And he walks in and he can't smell it. But all of a sudden he just starts sneezing uncontrollably. He's like, Mom, what's going on in here? I'm like, sorry, bud. Sorry, I'm making hot, I'm making cayenne pepper and crushed red pepper. Anyway, that's awesome there. But yeah, I don't notice a huge difference with like butternut squash. I mean, but I do grow a ton of butternut squash because I love to harvest and save it and freeze it. And I freeze mine. They
store well. Yeah.
Yeah. It stores so good. I just love it. So
I have to say one that is different that I actually like is I've noticed a difference is sweet potatoes. But sweet potatoes, so when you grow sweet potatoes, you have to wait. First, you have to cure them. So it's sad because you can't just pull it out. You have to wait for them to cure. But the longer you wait, the sweeter they get. So I like to save a few sweet potatoes until like March. Then they're just like candy. So
I had no idea.
That one I did notice, like with your starches, that's the one that I feel like is a big difference versus the winter squash or potatoes.
Okay, you've inspired me. I've never grown that before. So that's the one thing I've tried. Okay, so right after the break, we'll be right back with Cynthia Stringham from Melon Monologues. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in our virtual studio today is Cynthia Stringham, aka Melon Monologues on Instagram. And we have just been having such a riot talking about vegetables and flowers and, just all the good things that you can grow in your garden. And the other thing is she was mentioning to me that you've got a virtual event coming up. Tell us all about this. It's so interesting.
Yeah, so ventureout.org, they are a group that they have these fantastic events in the summer for the Mill Creek Township area, but everybody's invited. But this year, due to COVID, they are going to be doing virtual parties. And they are actually just focusing towards children. So it's going to be Fridays from 10 to 10:30, a live Zoom call. And they're just focusing on like kindergarten up to 12 years old that can register for free. And I, right here, am the host for Venture Out. And I'm super excited because it's all about going outside, exploring, and getting your hands dirty in the dirt and talking about gardening. So on June 12th is the first one that we're going to do. And I am talking about composting, but not just composting. We're doing vermicomposting or worm composting because I have a bunch of worms. So if you have little kids or you know anybody that has little kids, tell them to sign up for this and they'll get really excited. I've had lots of people tell me, they have their kids, but their kids are afraid to play outside sometimes because of the bugs and the critters that are around. And so my whole goal this summer is just to get kids super excited and realizing, one, you're a lot bigger than a spider. And two,
Right.
there's it's okay to hold bugs, it's okay to hold worms, and it's okay to explore outside. So I'm really excited to try this summer. It's going to be something new. I'm guessing the first one might be a little, I don't know, different.
Yeah.
It might be a struggle, but come and join.
Yeah. That sounds like so much fun. My daughter's 14, but I totally want her to sign up for it because...
Have her sign up.
Totally.
Fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
She'll see me do the worm. That's something I can promise is I'm going to try to do the worm because we're going to have a dance break.
Oh, you're kidding. How fun.
Yeah. So it's going to be awesome.
Okay. So remind our listeners again. So it's ventureout.org, you said?
Yeah. Ventureout.org. You can sign up there and you it starts June 12th. And I believe it might be 16 weeks. So 16 Fridays. That you guys can join on from 10 to 10:30 in the morning. It's short, sweet, but it's going to be lots of fun. And I'm going to make a fool of myself, which I'm pretty good at in general, but now I got to do it for little kids, which probably means it's going to be even more than usual.
How fun. So each Friday is a completely different segment on something around nature and outside.
Yeah. So we have, like I said, we're going to talk about vermicomposting one week. And then we're going to talk about bees, and we're going to talk about monarchs, and we're going to talk about weeds. So yeah, there's going to be lots of really cool things in there.
Oh, wow. Okay. I love this. I definitely want my daughter to sign up. How cool is this? So ventureout.org, what a fun resource too. And especially during the summer, keeping kids involved and teaching them things that you wouldn't necessarily learn in school.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing. It's like there's so much to be learned in life. But sometimes the best resources are just right out our back door. So that's what I'm hoping to get kids excited about. It's like, let's go outside this summer. Especially, I feel like COVID kind of shifted gears a little bit, that we weren't so programmed during that time of quarantine. And I noticed my kids were outside a lot more, playing in our yard. And I hope more kids were. And I hope that continues because I think that's where a lot of creativity comes from.
I really believe so too. And I also hope that what it does, and I actually want to find a way to try to make sure this happens, but sometimes don't you feel like, and this is kind of pre-COVID because this is obviously like the year of the yard. Everyone's renewing their interest in
all the victory gardens. Ah!
Exactly. Let's grow our food, which I love. That's fantastic. And what I'm hoping, because I've always been worried, like, is the next generation not going to be interested in gardening? And are they going to have the skills to grow their own food? And that's one of the positives that I hope comes from this.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think I see a huge uptick. I mean, my neighbors' kids have been like really into our garden this year. We actually got some extra bee suits for kids to come and look at bees in their bee suits because they get really nervous. I'm like, no, these are creatures, and life is not to be, scared of. We're going to be okay. And I think if anything, there's a lot of solace that comes with nature of knowing that every season turns. That song was that. To every season, turn. Just kidding.
Oh, yes.
But just this, okay, when we see these things, it's a good thing. It's okay to have nature take its course. And I noticed that my kids, at least, and like I said, a lot of the neighbor kids are recognizing that. So hopefully that will gear them towards the right direction.
Absolutely. It's so true. Now I have that song will be stuck in my head all day.
I know. I'm sorry. No, I can't get it out of my head either.
It's a great song. I mean, it's such a metaphor, So Speaking of bees, that is another thing that you and I have in common is we both are backyard beekeepers.
Yes.
And, I'm so passionate about quote unquote saving the bees because obviously without bees, we wouldn't have a food supply, and it would be,
It'd be a lot harder, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So let's talk about backyard beekeeping and throwing out some of the pros and cons to our listeners and maybe inspire some people to not be afraid.
Yeah. Well, pros, they are so cool. It is so fun when you get into beekeeping to see these colonies and see how hard these little bees work and know what it takes for them to make just a teaspoon of honey. Can't remember the statistic, but it is a lot of visits to thousands upon thousands of flowers for those bees to make a teaspoon of honey. And they are, I think one thing that people think is bees, I'm going to get stung. They don't care about you. They really don't. They have their work cut out for them. And the last thing they need is for you to be running away or swatting at them. I mean, they just fly away the majority of the time. Con, that little minority of the time that you are in their way and you are making them mad and you're pissing them off can lead to you being stung.
Yes.
And this has been, I haven't been stung in so long. I've had right now we currently have 5 hives, only 3 on our property and 2 on another person's property.
Oh, wow.
And the majority of the time when none of my kids have been stung by our bees in our backyard ever. My kids have never been stung. I have. I got stung this year. Yes. I usually am stung elsewhere too. I'm never stung at my house. But this year, I don't know what's up, but there is one hive that is after me. And I was out watering and I was really mad because this bee kept, so here's a side note. If a bee keeps running into your forehead or is buzzing around you, it's saying, get away. It's telling you, it's giving you a warning. It doesn't want to sting you. It doesn't want to die, but it wants you to get away. It feels threatened. Well, yes. I was feeling threatened too because I'm watering my garden. I'm like, dude, back off. So my neighbor, she's like, I wish I had this on film. I'm sitting there spraying this water around my head, trying to get rid of the bee because I'm like, I'm not leaving, you leave. And I'm spraying the water everywhere. And she's watching me swinging this wand around and water's going all over me. I'm sopping wet. Anyways, so I go to turn off the water. The bee had followed me and it went zip and it stung me right below my nose, between my lip and my nose. And I knew the instant it happened. So I if you get stung, in general, it's not a big deal. But when you get stung in your face, it's going to swell. And there is a great video. If you guys need a source of entertainment or if you have a low point in your life and you need some laughter, go watch it when I got stung on the face because it is a matter of minutes that my face just starts expanding and blowing up like a balloon. And it looks like I got really bad Botox. And then beyond that, my eye gets swollen. It was a good 4-day process of me changing many forms and shapes. So that's the con. Every once in a while, there's a bad bee in the bunch.
Well, it sounds like you instigated it just a little bit. Just probably though, by not being afraid, right? Because I'm not afraid of my bees either. And so I could see myself being like, no, dude, you're not going to sting me. I know. So just move aside. And then next thing you know,
there's always that one.
There's always that one. So if you want to check it out, what she's talking about, she did this great Instagram story, and you can find it at Melon Monologues on Instagram, and just look up the highlights. And I think you called it bee sting, right?
Bee sting. Yeah, bee sting. Yeah.
That looked so painful. But it really,
beyond that, like the bees really don't bother you. I mean, and they're so fascinating to watch. And then beyond that, you get your awesome honey.
Oh my word. Well, we keep saying, is there anything better than going out and picking some fresh tomatoes and making a tomato sandwich?
There is.
Yes, there is. Absolutely. And that's another thing that tastes so exponentially different is fresh, raw honey from your backyard.
We have different jars that we save for each year because each year tastes different. And so it's kind of like a fine wine, right?
Absolutely.
Like the year of 2014. Oh, that was a good year. It was a very good year.
Such a good year. I think that a lot of people are really afraid of getting bees because they are worried about getting stung. And again, that was a rarity for you, obviously. And, my kids have never been stung, not one. Like, I know yours haven't either. My kids have never been stung by a bee in our yard. My neighbor has 6 hives. I just have 1. But my neighbor has 6, and I've never been stung by their bees. So, it is a rarity, though. Now, those wasps, though, they hunt you down and kill you.
Oh, yeah. Those wasps are another story. And I think give all stinging insects a bad name. So those wasps are they like to, because they can keep stinging. And and that's another thing. Don't swat at bumbles. Bumblebees are like the sweetest little things. They are so docile. And I know they're just really big and bumbly, like they just kind of run all over the place, but they are not after you at all. They're just trying to make it to the next pollen infested flower that they can roll in like a big puppy dog in mud. So.
That's right. And another pro of bees that I found is absolutely the pollination. I mean, my flowers, it's such a dramatic difference, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. For all the fruits and everything. I mean, it's huge, especially for example, like corn. I don't know if you are familiar with the way that corn is pollinated, but the tassels at the very top need to touch. They need to have the pollen drip down and touch the silks, and that each silk is connected to a kernel of corn. So if you don't have great corn, or all the kernels aren't being inflated, it's because they were not pollinated correctly. So you need those bees in there to make that happen. I mean, they're just so important with our food system that to help our food pollinate correctly. I mean, you can do it by hand, but man, who's got time for that?
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to do is walk up and down my cornfield.
Yeah, no, humans would never do that, but I tell you what, bees sure will.
I know. They're willing to work it on.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, this has been such a fun conversation. I have to have you back on the show. So I can't wait to, bring you back again and keep talking. And thank you so much for joining us. You can find Cynthia on Instagram at Melon Monologues. Thank you so much for joining us today on Gardening Utah.
Yes, thank you, Jana. Please have me back. This was awesome.
Absolutely.
Garden party.
I love it.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Gardening Utah. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you had as much fun as we did. And while you're at Instagram checking out Melon Monologues, look us up too. We are at Gardening Utah. Give us a follow. And don't forget to subscribe to Gardening Utah on Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week on Gardening Utah. And remember, grow big or go home.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.
We are supported by ProgressivePlant.com. They are the experts that the professionals go to for all things plants. Progressive Plants has over 1 million plants at their 100-acre nursery up in Copperton. And you can shop those plants from right at home at ProgressivePlants.com. They are your neighbors next door and experts at helping you choose the perfect and unique plants that will thrive in your location. rotation. Progressive Plants is passionate about helping homeowners, expert gardeners, novices alike choose the correct plant for your soil. They don't just grow plants, they know plants. Let Progressive Plants help you today. Just go to progressiveplants.com and check out their wide selection. You can also go to the Design tab and look at the expert designers that they have that can help you plan your perfect yard. Visit progressiveplants.com today.